really where
I was. And then the environment was cleaned up.
The first time I was hearing about this stuff, it was totally new to me.
With social impact consulting.
Civil society represents the third sector, if you may, and it's inclusive of the media, NGOs, thought leaders, and people who just have a say in how a country, a people, or a place is run.
At the core of the work that we do is a strong belief that to really address educational inequity and inequality requires us really building a critical mass of dynamic, passionate, committed leaders who will dedicate themselves to addressing the different issues within the educational sector and the educational space.
Young people need to get into the government and then be able to push for issues that affect them, because you can't keep staying out and then thinking that things will work in for your own good. So you need to be able to prepare yourself.
Society represents a community of engaged individuals who work with us to build consensus around progressive policy options and to give citizens a voice in governance.
Was a year of consciousness. So with that consciousness, we are going to see more action, more civic activism.
If you look at the rights and freedom of citizens to express themselves freely, that is deteriorating.
One of the major threats to the civic space in 2022 remains government, repressive governments and governmental action.
Advocacy is for a purpose, to influence social change in the positive direction.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Development Sector Series, which is Dev Sector Series. Thank you so much for showing up again. I'm just excited. You know, the elections are in the air. We're having a new administration. We're having so many things going on in the country. There is still a lot of uncertainty, but you know, there's still some renewed hope that, okay, there's going to be a change. No matter who you are supporting, you're just trying to figure out, like, whoever you're supporting, you feel like that person can change things. So I'm very excited to be here. So if you are, if you're here with me, please make sure you like and share. I would like to thank Mr. Matthew Ahiaba for waiting patiently while we went live. Lawrence Obo, thank you so much for coming. And these are from YouTube. Then I have Abdul Rahman Abdul. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And those of you on Facebook, just kind of let me know your name, where you're chatting from, so that I can give you a shout out. And don't forget to like and share so that more people can know what we're doing, because I am passionate about the development sector. We have some of the brightest minds in the world in Africa. So because of that, I want to feature them. I want to have a conversation with them so that, you know, you all can see what I see when I talk to so many. I've traveled all over the country. I've built relationships, you know, which is what an organizer does. And I've got to meet so many people, even the guests that I'm about to introduce today, that are just some of the brightest minds, that are world renowned, that are requested to speak all over the world. So I just want to introduce them, and I want to let you know that Nigerians are making a change in their capacity. So not everybody is just sitting around complaining and saying, oh, Nigeria is bad, or oh, Africa is bad, oh, Ghana is bad, Senegal is bad, Cameroon is bad. There are people that are actually doing something about it in their own capacity. And because they're doing that, the world is seeing what they're doing, and they're known for what they do. So if you feel the same way I do, which is why you're watching, please ensure you like and share this video, okay? So today we are having an exciting conversation, which is the 2023 Civic Space Outlook. Now, for those of you who have been watching Dev Sector series over the years, we started this series on the Civic Space Outlook in 2021. So we had the conversation about the Civic Space Outlook, and let me just give you a small gist, just a little bit. Let me tell you a story. Story time. So I was, I started really doing some research on the civic space about 3 years ago, a couple of years ago. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I went on Google. When you're researching something, the first thing you do is Google the person and Google the topic. So I Googled civic space in Nigeria. And these guest articles were the top 3 articles in different global periodicals. It wasn't just, though we have good Nigerian periodicals, not to knock Nigerian periodicals, but these were global periodicals. And she wrote detailed articles on the civic space. Even before they started having the conversation, she was writing it in 2000 or I think 2010, 2009. Like she's been talking about the civic space for so long. Okay, so that's why I said, okay, let's have a 2021 Civic Space Outlook. We had that conversation, and then 2022 we worked on a Civic Space Outlook. We did an interview similar to that, and then also a documentary, expanded it to a documentary. And of course, when you're producing a documentary, you kind of know the ins and outs. You're coming up with B-rolls, you're doing your research, you're working with your team, and then at the same, so you're now diving deep into the topic. Now, what I also noticed as well was that I now began to see everything she talked about play out. Okay, where you had media clampdowns. Arise TV. Some people, a particular political party went to Arise TV and threatened, a couple of the hosts at the morning show, Rufai and Dr. Ruben Abati. So you had that happen. You had a couple of people in the presidential villa, I believe is the first lady, that they said it was alleged that she kidnapped them and beat them up. So these were things that she was talking about in 2022. So I am looking forward to this conversation on the 2023 Civic Space Outlook, because she is going to provide, some more trends. And she doesn't just talk. She uses research. She uses trend analysis. She uses the research methodology that she's gathered over the years to make these predictions. So she's not talking, based on how she's feeling. They also have a platform called closingspaces.org if you want to know the civic space trends that are happening in West Africa. So if you're really interested in civic space, like I am, you can go there and look at the trends that are happening in West Africa. So without much more ado, I am going to read her bio and then introduce our special guest. So I am so excited about this. So hang tight. Let me read her bio, okay? All right. So Victoria Ibezim-Ohaeri is the founder and executive director at Spaces for Change, a nonprofit organization based in Nigeria that conducts cutting-edge research and advocacy, focusing on strategic sectors such as urban governance, gender inclusion, energy policy, and defending the civic space. In her 15-year legal career and involvement in social and economic rights, research, and advocacy, she traversed 4 continents: Africa, Europe, North America, South America, leading research investigations, documenting and exposing human rights violations, formulating and analyzing social and economic policy at national, regional, and international levels. Victoria has spent the past 8 years at Spaces for Change, which is S4C, conducting rigorous research studies and policy analysis, empowering underserved communities, advising private and public institutions, speaking at high-level national and international convenings, and facilitating multi-stakeholder policy dialogues on critical social and economic justice issues. As the organization director of research and policy also, she has led and participated in major international studies commissioned by UN Habitat, COHRE, MSI Integrity, Ford Foundation, International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD, Institute for Development Studies, Fund for Global Rights, Energer, Women Leadership Learning Partnership, University College London's Bartlett Development Planning Unit, Connectors, among many, many others. She writes for numerous national dailies and also sits on the board of a number of national and international non-governmental organizations, such as Publish What You Pay International, Journalist Initiative for Sustainable Development, Good Women Association, Legal Research Center, etc., etc., etc. She is also a leading member of several international networks, such as Expert Hub on Anti-Money Laundering and Countering Financial Terrorism, that's a long one, Solidarity Action Network, VUCA Coalition, Publish What You Pay, Security Policy Alternatives Network, Global CSO Coalition on Counterterrorism Advocacy, Friends of Fossil Fuel Subsidy Reform, and so many, many others. Sure, I told you that I'm talking to some of the smartest people ever. Allow me to introduce to some and present to others Victoria Ibezim-Ohaeri, the Executive Director of Spaces for Change. Hello,
Hi,
Victoria. How are you? Good to
morning.
see you.
Greetings from Lagos, Nigeria.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to have this conversation about the 2023 Civic Space Outlook. Now, I just wanted to Spaces for Change just released a report on civic space in West Africa, threats and futures. And I put it on the comment section. So if you want to download it, just click on the link on this live video, and then you will be able to see the report, okay? So we're gonna get started. All right. So just a second. All right. So what are based on your predictions last year in the 2022 Civic Space Outlook, what are your thoughts now about the civic space in Nigeria at the moment?
Yes, so thank you for all your kind words and your generous introduction. Yes, I'm going back to what you call predictions. What you call predictions are not necessarily predictions. They are, like you rightly mentioned, we host the database on closing civic spaces, where we are regularly on a daily basis tracking the incidents of crackdowns on the civic space. You know, the extent that certain liberties around free speech, assembly and association rights are being monitored, the tactics that are being used, the drivers, the flashpoints, the enablers, the victims. You know, when you are constantly monitoring and documenting that data, whenever we analyze it, it gives you certain results. Those results are probably what you call predictions, because what we call them here is strengths. When you put together, when the incidents accumulate, you know, based on the data we're curating, and we do some analysis, we're able to sift uniform trends and patterns that we're seeing. So we do the trends mapping, we do the pattern analysis, and it gives you certain results. It gives you idea of what is likely to happen when this and this. It's just like putting 2 and 2, you get 4. So some of the things we talked about last year, we also looked at the trends that we saw. The last election was in 2019, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that was in 2019.
Yes.
Yes, 2019. So we also looked at the elections. There were elections also in 2015. There were elections also in 2011. So the years before the election year, what are the trends that we have seen? And we see a consistent pattern. And just that technology is really amplifying or magnifying some of the shocks and stresses that we're seeing on the civic space. So what are we seeing? We've seen that a lot of things that we anticipated will happen, the misinformation, disinformation. We also seen the use of propaganda. We also seeing increasing number of arrests. We also seeing shrinking political spaces. We're seeing increasing attacks on the political opposition. Seeing a lot of what do they call it? Horse trading. A lot of intrigues. A lot of bitterness. A lot of new alliances, old alliances breaking down, new alliances being formed. But the beautiful thing coming out, I think we also mentioned it, is how the translation of youthful anger that we saw at NSAS, during NSAS,
Yes,
how
definitely.
that anger will be translated to political participation. And we are seeing the highest ever number of first registrants, first registrants, a lot of young people voting and now leading certain campaigns, political campaigns, using technology, leveraging technology to amplify messages, support whomever that they choose, and popularize their candidates on social media, and making it clear that they are going to use the ballot to express their anger.
Yeah. You're definitely right about that. And those predictions did happen. Like you said, old alliances breaking down, new alliances coming up, and the use of technology. So, in your findings in the Civic Space report, I was able to read through it, and it says that based on the analysis, journalists are disproportionately attacked. How does this translate to the current political climate in Nigeria?
Okay, so the report you talked about, which is our recent report, the Civic Space Trends, Threats and Futures report, what that report has done is to map and collect resources on the observed trends and drivers of global civic space in West Africa, not just Nigeria. So we highlighted the priority action areas for human rights defenders, for activists and campaigners. So based on those observed trends and the analysis of those trends, it uncovered the tactics popularly used to obstruct the civic space. We looked at the groups most targeted. We looked at the rights violated the most. We looked at the increasing role of non-state actors in creating a hostile environment for civic participation, both online and offline. And it is on that basis that journalists were singled out as one of the groups, as a group targeted more than any other set of civic actors. And it is very worrying because for elections to be free and fair, journalists play a critical role. They play the role of the messenger, talking about what is happening in all sides. They usually don't take any side. So whatever that is happening, whatever citizens want, whatever public opinion, whatever it is, whatever messages or information that is being rolled out by the government, media is the channel for everybody, for the government to hear from the people, for the people to hear from the government, to report, to show picture, to visualize, to demonstrate, to amplify. They sit at the center of the whole electoral process. So, but where you now have journalists being attacked, it might affect the temperature of the civic space during that period. It means that people will walk with fear, in an atmosphere of fear and trepidation, sometimes courage takes flight. And when courage takes flight, it creates room for manipulation, for censorship. Only those whose voices have been, compromised voices, hold sway in such times. But the good news we have is that social media has helped to democratize the media space. So with technology has helped to democratize access to information. So where there is massive repression, people can use a lot of tools to increase anonymity, to amplify messages from locations where they deem themselves safe. So technology is going to provide some respite if it becomes increasingly difficult or the atmosphere becomes too problematic for journalists to operate. But that finding alone is something that we need to worry about and tackle.
Yeah, because I've noticed that some of it, quite a few known investigative journalists are not even reporting from Nigeria. They are reporting from other countries, because they feel like their lives are threatened or are in danger or what have you. So now I have another question. The civic space as described, of course, is freedom of speech, association, and expression, and civil society organizations are various groups of people. I have noticed that journalists tend to, not all, but some tend to separate themselves from advocacy organizations or non-profits. Oh, you people are doing this and you people are doing that, whereas there needs to be some sort of synergy. Have you noticed something like that? Does that affect the civic space as well?
Well, I have not noticed that they distance themselves from
Okay.
development or advocacy
Okay.
organizations.
Okay.
And our work here, Spaces for Change, there is a lot of interaction with the media.
Okay.
There is a lot of also collaboration with the media. They participate in our events. They publish, independently some of the activities that they participated in. But where that happens, maybe it might be due to fear of reprisals. When they identify with a particular organization, it might attract certain kind of reprisal. And reprisals take various forms. It could take the form of being disinvited to meetings or being
I
excluded in
see.
conversations where they think
Mhm.
they should be, in important meeting rooms that they think it is important for them to be a part of, and being disinvited or being even excluded from participating in those meetings. Sometimes it could just be living in fear. It could just be visits, invited by the authorities to appear or report to a certain police station. Sometimes it could be arson on their private property. Sometimes it could be visa denials. Sometimes it could be travel bans. So there are different kinds of reprisals. Sometimes it could be job losses when somebody simply calls your boss and and makes a certain complaint that results in that person being taken out from work. So these are some of the things that make journalists not wanting to identify with a particular advocacy group. But if that trend is actually taking place, it's something that needs to be deeply looked into.
Okay. So we're gonna go into the elections and the civic space. What are your projections based on what you've watched over the past few election cycles? What do you feel like your project? What are your projections in Nigeria as we head towards the 2023 elections?
Yeah, so we made projections last year that there will be a lot of the civic engagement will be higher than usual,
Okay.
and a lot of citizens will get into the business of interrogating political candidates, their histories, their achievements, and whether they are who they say they are. And we have seen that happen a lot with citizens, digging deep. If you have presented a certificate, people want to know whether it emanated from the right authorities. If you claim you have been in a particular location or worked in a particular location or served in any capacity, people want to check and be sure that your claims are accurate. Another thing that has happened is the rise of, fact checking. A lot of organizations now in the business of fact checking. So if you say 2 years ago, I worked so hard that I raised the internally generated revenue by 15%, people want to check whether it is indeed true by 15%. So we have a lot of fact checking organizations, right? Emerging in 2023, more than any other election year. Another thing that we, talked about that was going to happen is the place of youth in these elections. And we have seen that the type of campaigning we saw in 2023 is different from the other types of campaigns, electoral campaigns we've seen in this country. What used to happen before was that during election period, politicians will fry akara, drink pure water on the streets, share money, it was just a time of eye service. You will see them go to public schools. Some of them will even enroll their children in public schools during the election period. Some of them will go to markets, some will even sweep the streets. It was just theatrical displays of populism. That was what was witnessed in the past. But this year, all those things disappeared. We are now seeing much more of people are going to Chatham House, trying to demonstrate their intellectual stamina, showing that they are intellectual, they have the intellectual capacity, they have the political capabilities, they are street smart enough. This is the year where I think this year elections have been run more on intelligence, than cheap populism. So
yeah, even NESG actually had some dialogues with them individually, which I don't think has ever happened before.
Oh, never ever happened. There were lots of dialogues. There was the citizens one. There was the ones organized by media stations. There were the ones organized by the one you're talking about, NESG. Then
Yes.
and all of those forums, people are really interrogating. What kind of policies are we going to see? We're now going into real issue-based campaigning. What kind of policies? What are your ideas on insecurity? What are ideas on education? What are ideas on women? What are ideas for children? What are ideas for agriculture? How are you going to create jobs? People want answers to the real problems of Nigeria. So we saw a significant shift from akara of politics to, to serious things. And another thing we are seeing the role of technology. And you see, even INEC adopted the beavers, technology, the elections to minimize incidents of, electoral malpractice. And that is huge. That is to say, it's not just the youth that are using technology. Even the government now recognizes the importance of transiting to technology-powered electoral systems to minimize some of the manipulations that we have been seeing in our electoral system. Another thing that we talked about is that the civic space is really going to contract in terms of people, some of the things that people say will get them into trouble. So you see, you gave the example of that young person that tweeted about the president's wife becoming fat and what happened to this person. He is not alone. There are lots and lots of other incidents, lots of groups that have been target of attacks on account of roles that they are performing, some things they've written about, some things that they have said. And finally, the shrinking of political spaces where certain governors are locking up the stadium, not wanting other opposition groups to use the stadium or use public facilities. It has, I think, across states, we have seen incidents from Rivers, from Edo, from Anambra State, and in most of those places, we see that even opposition politicians are also brunt bearers, not just citizens. They are now part of those bearing the brunt of the electoral, gymnastics that are playing out in our politics. So these are some of the things that we might discuss that last year that is going to happen a lot, that the transition from that consciousness to participation is going to happen. And we're happy that many of those things are now, beginning to happen.
And I think one thing that technology has also done, it exposes various issues. Like you mentioned, the fact checking, but even on the campaign grounds, if there are any weaknesses or anything that happens, I think there was a time where Obi supporters in Edo State drove away APC. There was, an incident where they showed a big crowd. They said it was in Sokoto State, and then people began to expose some of the manipulations in the photos. I mean, it just, with PDP, the issues going on there, and even Labour Party, they say, oh, this stadium, they said it was full, but it was scanty. So it just, like, technology just exposes, it just democratizes the process, like you said. It really does. It really does. So let me get to the next question. Now, let's say, 2023, the elections are going to happen, and then a new president is going to be installed, So, like, what do you think so if they're listening to us here, what do you think, what measures can they take? Currently, according to the Civicus Monitor, we are now ranked repressed. What can they do to now increase our rankings so that the civic space is more open for all?
Okay, so this report, let me bring it closer.
Okay.
When we did this report, I think what this report did is to share. If you just put the name online.
Yes, it's actually on all the platforms. The link is on the platform. For
if you just
it.
type out the name on Google, it shows you, the some of the things that we mentioned that can happen to open up the space. The first is that whatever government that is coming in must recognize that dissent is the bedrock of democracy. In any democracy, it is normal and okay for people to see things differently. It is normal for people to have different perspectives on the same issue. One thing that we have realized is that two people can hold two separate or distinct perspectives, or even opposing perspectives, and both can still be correct. Okay. So when the government realizes that dissent is the bedrock of democracy, they should respect dissenting voices. That's the first part. The second part are like some of those structures of restrictions. And what are those structures? There are a lot of the laws, a lot of security laws, a lot of economic policies that are being churned out that restrict the ability of citizens to speak freely, that restrict the ability of citizens to assemble freely, the ability of citizens to associate freely, both online and offline. So because when we say space, the spaces can be digital, they can be traditional. So any government needs to come in and encourage the National Assembly to relax those provisions and give us an atmosphere where people can say things freely. Another thing that we need for a very functioning civic space is strong judicial institutions. We need the judiciary to be strong and independent. Let me tell you why this is important. Executive overreach sometimes happens unintentionally, where state actors, while acting in the national interest or in the interest of national security, they take certain conducts that violate civil liberties. Maybe they're doing it with the best of intentions because they want to protect their territorial sovereignty. But the role of the court is to show them alternative ways, to independently review what the government has done and say, oh no, while you have the power to do this, these are the red lines you should not cross. So what they do there, what their role of the judiciary is to tame abuse of power, tame overreach, and to give guidance to other organs of government, and to provide legal redress to the persons that have been hurt intentionally or unintentionally. So if that mechanism that is an unbiased umpire is weak or ineffective, the civic space is certainly going to shrink.
Okay.
Another agency that needs to be reformed is the security agencies. From the trends we have been observing in Nigeria and across West Africa, the main perpetrators of shrinking civic space are security agents. From the DSS, police, the army, they are the ones effecting the arrest, they are the ones detaining people beyond the constitutionally prescribed limits, they are the ones, putting people in detention centers without any form of charge. And this is contrary to our constitution. They are the ones, using various excuses being used by state and non-state actors to shrink the civic space. And why it is important to reform those, because that is essentially why NSAS happened. Because citizens were complaining, these are the things, these are the sins of security agencies. This is how they have abused, these are the number of people, these are the casualties, these are the incidents, and there was no accountability, and there was no reform, and there was no improvement in our policing. And all of those have contributed in contracting the civic space. So any government that is coming in now that is interested to open the civic space must reform the security architecture of this country, prevent the misuse of the security architecture, using security as an excuse to violate human rights, using security as an excuse to overreach executive purposes, right? That needs to stop, needs to strengthen the judiciary, needs to respect and reform the laws, and also needs to recognize that dissent is an essential part of democracy.
Okay, that is a really good point, because the judiciary, it provides a balance. But I guess one of the concerns that I have is the executive's disregard for the judiciary, because when I was reading the report last night, I saw that there were some various examples where the judiciary will provide a ruling, like El Zaki from this Muslim group, he has not been released. Then you have Nnamdi Kanu, he had not been released. So these are high profile cases. But what about some of the lower profile cases that we don't even hear about? So how do we how does this new administration make sure that there is no disregard for judicial ruling, and even some of the corruption in the judiciary? That's also another conversation that needs to be had as well. So where can they even start so that they don't come in, they get overwhelmed and just say, you know what, I'm not touching that. You know what I mean? So how do they even start?
Yeah, it was in the last this outgoing administration that something that was unthinkable happened. The Chief Justice of the Federation, that judicial organ of government, is untouchable, has always remained like that, even in the military regime. But we saw how a judge was suspended and removed from office through means that are publicly adjudged not to be constitutional. It's the first time. But let me tell you what that happened. What happened was that it sent shockwaves to the judiciary. If it could happen to the topmost judicial officer, what do you think these junior ones will do? They just fall in line. It was a message from the executive to the judiciary that if you misbehave, we'll put you in your place, we'll take you out.
Yeah.
So the consequence is that judicial officers will find it harder to handle cases without fear or favor. Exactly. And the person that bears the brunt of that is the common man. Mm-hmm. Like you rightly mentioned, some of the cases that we shared, that were even shared in that report, mm-hmm. are mainly the high-profile cases. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of smaller cases that do not make it to the news, where court orders are disobeyed daily basis, court rulings are disregarded, judges are facing reprisals, you saw in some years ago when certain judges, their apartments were invaded in the night.
Yes, I remember.
In the night. So all of those things have sent shockwaves to our judiciary, and the truth is that this judicial space is also shrinking. Any new government that is coming in needs to now grant total independence, respect the independence that is already enshrined in the Constitution. So the Constitution says these three organs will function independently. So we need to grant financial independence to these institutions so that they don't rely on the executive. So what we have now, the current structure we have now, is that they rely on the executives to approve their budget. They rely on the executives to pay their salaries. They rely on the executives to appoint them. They rely on the executives. So who takes the piper? Who plays the piper?
Dictates the
So
tune.
it is a constitutional issue where the new government, the new incoming, will work hand in hand with the parliament to restore order. The first form of order is legal reform.
Okay. That's at least that's a good place for them to start. So before I ask your final question, I just want to appeal to the audience. If you have any questions for Victoria on this very, very interesting discussion that we're having, if you have any questions, so we can continue this discussion, please put it in the comments, and then we will ask after this final question, okay? Otherwise, we'll just we'll just take her through her final thoughts. So if you have any questions, now is the time. Okay, so we're gonna go to the final question, and this goes into Spaces for Change. So what more should we be looking forward to from Spaces for Change in 2023? You had a very full packed 2022. So what should we be expecting from you? And if you guys have not subscribed to their newsletter, go to their website and make sure you do that, okay? The website is right down this the banner down here. So you could check it out, join their newsletter. So what should we be expecting from you guys in 2023?
Yes, so this year is the year of expansion.
Okay.
Last year, we actually started an expansion program last year where we are taking our compliance clinics to other parts of West Africa. We have released the Civic Space Trends and Futures report, which is also focusing on West Africa. We are going to have a lot of programs across West African countries this year, from trainings to research to capacity building to community engagements to policy influencing. We're going to go around South Africa, West Africa a bit, doing some work around the civic space. And why is this important for us? Is because we're noticing that governments are copying and pasting bad practices. So if you see a law, maybe a country in West Africa says we're introducing social media tax. If you have 5,000 followers, we are now going to regard you as media. Or you see somebody who has been arrested in country X on account of a Facebook post. You can never say this is happening in Syria alone or it's happening in Senegal. It's not our business. Before you know it, it's at the back of your house.
I'm telling you.
You see one law that sounds tin in another country. Before you know it, is at the back of your house. So what the lawmakers are doing is just like they edit out that country's name and just put Nigeria's name. At the National Assembly right now, we see a flurry of laws designed to reduce. And many of these initiatives are actually not well informed. I dare say they are not well informed because they are rolling back the progress that the country is making in trying to secure a favorable rating. And for the country to secure that favorable rating, they need to prove that NGOs are not overregulated in Nigeria. They need to prove that the civil society, the legal environment for civil society does not disrupt legitimate charitable operation. So certain agencies are working to improve that credibility within in the non-profit regulation space. Others are working across proposals, with those other entities. So there's still a lot of confusion, policy and regulatory confusion that is going on in the country. And Spaces for Change will step into that confusion, at some point, working with the right stakeholders to see how to resolve some of the policy confusions that we're seeing. And I think we are also going to do a lot of work around the civic space, like after the elections, because usually after the elections, that is when you begin to monitor, compare different, different regimes. Before, we used to say before 2015 to show that it is different from a previous administration. So a lot of our analysis now will say before 2023 to show that there has been a shift and a change of pattern. So we're going to monitor a lot of trends and compare it to previous ones to see whether the civil space, there's an improvement, upward movement of the chart, or whether there is a downward movement on the chart. So we are not going to rest on our hours. This is the time to even do more work, do more monitoring, do more comparative analysis, and bring the results forward for citizens to take action.
Thank you so much. You all are doing such excellent work, and the fact that you're going regional is really commendable, because trying to make sure that policies that are being implemented in other countries open the civic space, and if not, making sure that other countries don't keep copying and pasting policies. But we have some questions for you, Victoria. So before I start the questions, Abdul Rahman, I saw your definition of the civic space, which was really good. I don't know whether you went and opened the report and copied and pasted it. But you said civic space is generally a collection of globally accepted rules that allow people to organize, contribute, and connect with each other freely without limitation. In doing so, influence political and social forms around them. So also covering policy making, affecting their lives, accessing information, engaging in dialogue, expression, dissent or disagreement, and joining to express their opinion. So, I don't know, I feel like I'm rereading something that I read yesterday. So just saying. So thank you so much for sharing that. And then I will go with Mrs. Ekwase Egbe. She said here, how safe are we to go and vote? That is a very, very, very good question, Victoria.
I wish I have the answer to that question. I neither work for INEC or for the security agencies, but I think all of the incidents of insecurity that we are learning about that have been on the peak since the election season, insecurity has peaked. And that happened in 2011. I don't know whether you remember 2011, there were bomb blasts every Sunday in different churches before 2011 elections.
Yeah, I remember.
2014 was among the deadliest years in this country as well. Explosions.
I remember.
That was the year before 2015. The same thing has happened. We're seeing insecurity, banditry, kidnapping in different parts of the country. That's what, hallmark of 2022, 2023 elections. What these security threats are out to achieve is to create fear, instill fear in people not to come out and vote. And I think this is the time for people to increase their resilience. And the BVAS technology is going to help the rise of people power, in the sense that they said that whether or not there's internet, the results will be electronically transmitted to the INEC portal. And that means there is no need for you to start waiting. There's no need for voting, counting, and all. It will be electronically, and once it's at, everybody will go, everybody will know the results of their polling unit. As you are going, you already know the result. So people should go out and vote. The threats of insecurity, we know that it appears unsafe out there. But if we all, because of that, refuse to vote, we have given chance, we've given the bad guys an opportunity to actualize their ambition, which is to chase us away from polling unit. We are not going to go anywhere. We are going to go there, and we're going to wait until those results are submitted before we leave the polling unit. And if all Nigerians do this across our polling unit, the risk of manipulating this election will be very limited.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Mr. Kwasi, I hope that helps, because I know I'm going to vote no matter what, and I'm going to wait until the votes are being transmitted, because enough of the winner of an election getting votes from just a small percentage of the voting population. It needs to stop. So Abdurrahman gave another comment. He said Nigerian polls have come to be recognized with highly educated guesses about projected electoral outcomes. The validity of polls is a function of the level of education, candidate ideas, capability, outreach of candidates, political participation, and level of enlightenment in the different states and region. The more generally developed in the society, the more reliable the polls tend to be, because they derive from the general spirit of enlightenment and scientific consciousness. I think because of what we're doing now, because of a lot of citizen engagement, polls are now coming out, which is really interesting. But there's another question by Mr. Matthew Ahiaba. He said, is executive overreach alone to blame for the corruption in the judiciary?
So the corruption in the judiciary is another conversation altogether. It mainly derives from the cases brought before court. So how judicial corruption mainly happens? A judge needs to make it when every matter involves two parties before the court. There are litigants before the court, one on the prosecution, one on the defense side. Or one is the claimant and one is, either the claimant or the plaintiff, or one is the defendant or the respondent, as the case may be. So the judge needs to take a side. For justice to be seen to have been done, one side needs to win. And judicial corruption happens when the side that shouldn't win goes behind the back door or goes through the back door to influence the judge to produce certain outcome, right? So it's not really an executive thing, it's a personal thing. It comes from ethics and values of the individual judge. What a judge does is not well grounded in work ethics and the right values, they will be prone to corruption. So if executive overreach is a separate thing, which is where the executive is using its powers to repress the ability of judicial organs to do their jobs effectively. So that is, so executive overreach is not to blame for the corruption in the judiciary. Maybe corruption could happen maybe where the executive appoints the wrong person to sit atop the judicial process. That is corruption, because there is there's a seniority at the back, So in the judiciary, if you look at the Supreme Court justices, there is an order of seniority. You know who the next SCJN is. Even after the next one, the next person that will come. So that orderliness is always followed. But where the executive jumps or overrides that order and gets someone, that's a form of corruption. But if you bring somebody through that channel, that person is going to be beholden to the appointee, right? And that's also a form of corruption. Maybe that's what Matthew is trying to talk about, because that's a executive overreach as well.
Thank you so much. So we are going to thank you so much, Victoria. This has been an excellent conversation. Please, I know a lot of you are hanging with me. If you enjoyed this, make sure you share it. Make sure you share. Those of you on my YouTube channel, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified when we're going live. And please share this conversation, because it's the civic space. We're giving you future trends in 2023. You're going to reach back out to me and say, man, this is what Victoria talked about early in the year about 2023. So Victoria, can you please give us your final thoughts?
So just like we mentioned, I think that's Ikwase. She's the one that asked the question about should we go out and vote.
Yes,
I think
yes.
citizens, please, should go out and vote. All of the manipulations that we are seeing should never deter us. This is the time for us to be more resilient than ever. Nigerians are resilient people. This is the time for us to put our resilience to the test. And how are we going to do that? We're going to go out, vote for the candidate of our choice, defend our vote by watching that result transmitted before you go home. And whoever emerges, we should just not be bitter in loss or in victory. Either way, we should respect the outcomes of the elections and remain good and law-abiding citizens.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for this excellent, substantive interview, and and really monitoring and checking out the civic space. You all, please just visit their website, www.spacesforchange.org. They have numerous reports on the civic space, on so many other issues based on what I talked to you about, her introduction, talking about disenfranchisement of communities. They even work on the environment in terms of governance of oil spills and various issues. You would really enjoy their write-ups. I really enjoy them. I'm a researcher myself, but there are only few reports that I like to read, and Spaces for Change is one of them. So make sure you get on their website, click on it, click on resources. You'll find a plethora of resources. On my comment, my very first comment on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, you would see the download link of the civic space in West Africa, threats and future. So you can download that and just make that an evening read. You will be glad you did. Thank you again so much, Victoria, for your time and conversation with me. I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye, listeners and viewers.
Goodbye. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the Dev Sector Series interview with Victoria Ibezim-Ohaeri, Executive Director of Spaces for Change. For our next, we're going to be having a conversation next week on the Development Sector Series, #Dev Sector Series. I'm going to be chopping this up into shorts and reels and stories so you guys can watch it, share it, and like it, because this is important. Elections are next week, y'all. So you want information, you want to share this information to your friends and loved ones on the civic space. What is the civic space? Like I said, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of expression. If you think I'm a private sector player, this does not affect me, you have another thing coming, because the civic space affects us all. Thank you again so much for watching, and let's change the world together. Take care.